Hello guys and welcome to a new video. So in today's video we're going to talk about something called scope. So scope, which relates to variables, specifies where a variable could be used or reused inside of your program. We have already been writing programs and using scope already, but with the introduction of methods, uh, kind of talking about scope really makes sense. So here I just have an empty class and then I have a method, my main method. So let's say I have a method that I want to add in here. So public static void some method, really nothing, kind of exceptional I'm going to be doing here. So again, this method is void. It doesn't return anything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to define a variable. So sum, or some like number equals 10. So this number is defined in this method. If I try to access this number inside of my main, completely different method, let's see what we get. So I do sout number. We get an error. If you look into an error, it says number cannot be resolved to a variable. It simply says that your compiler has no idea what this number is. But if I take this line, cut it and paste it inside the method, notice there's actually nothing wrong, and there's no syntax error in here. So over here we define a variable called number, and this number is only known and recognized inside of the method it was defined in. In this case, it's some method. So this number is actually going to be called local variable. So it's only known inside of the method it belongs to. Let's do the other way around. So inside of the main, I'm going to define another variable called my number. And then my number is going to be 20. If I try to actually access my number inside some method, you still get the same thing. You still get an error. Because again, it was defined in the main, you use it in a completely different method. So it doesn't matter, you define it in a method, try to access it in the main method, that's illegal. Or if you define it in the method, try to access it in the main, that's illegal as well. So now what happens when, I define, so let's use my number in this case. So let's say I have a for loop. So for int I is 1, I is less than or equal to 10, I plus plus. Now in here I'll do sout my number. Obviously that's no problem. So typically speaking, when people talk about scope, you would have to pay close attention to those curly braces. So in this case, my number was defined in those two curly braces, which means that anywhere inside of those two curly braces, you can access my number, including in this case those nested curly braces. So my number inside the for loop, which is a brand new curly braces, is still accessible, and that's good. But what if I have a variable here called like temp equal 50? So temp is defined within those two curly braces. If I try to access temp outside of the for loop, I get an error, because again it belongs to those scope, which is in this case the for loop. So outside the for loop, you can't access temp. Again, if you take this, print it inside the for loop, no problem. But again, even inside the for loop, if I do if statement, so temp is greater than some number, like let's say 10, and then I will have another temp is less than 50, I will do sout my number. That's no problem. My number is defined in the main, it could be accessed anywhere inside of the main. So now, technically speaking, my number is actually called global variable as opposed to local variable for number or temp or any other variable you would define inside of, like a method or a for loop or a while loop or something similar. So a global variable could be used anywhere inside of your program. A local variable is can only be used inside of the structure that it was defined in. So those are a couple things I wanted to talk about. Now, since we are already here, uh, let's talk about the I variable, which is the counter of the for loop. So the while loop or the for loop in this case has I anywhere in my for loop. So obviously the scope is going to end here for the for loop, which means that the I variable could be used anywhere inside the for loop. So if I actually say my number times I, for instance, whatever that I is, that's perfectly fine. If I do also, again, like times temp, that's no problem too, because again, temp is defined inside the for loop, so you could use it anywhere inside of the for loop, including in here. Okay, so hope that makes sense. If you guys have any question, just let me know, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.